This is probably going to be the closest thing to getting Serum in a hardware box as possible. This is the Iridium core. It's been out since 2023, and this is something that I purchased with my own money because I wanted a physical synthesizer. This thing does a lot, packs a lot of punches. Unfortunately, we're going to be listening to this in mono as my Bitwig Connect has a couple of malfunctions, but I am getting it replaced very soon. Also, I have heard your complaints about my videos being super quiet. I'm looking at my monitoring right now and it's, as loud as almost hitting at the 0 dB mark. So if this is quiet, I'm sorry, we're getting it sorted out. Okay. With that being said, welcome to the channel. My name is Alckemy. Today we're going to be checking the Iridium core out, and it's going to be more so of a first look as opposed to, hey, this is my full review that shows everything about it. I will show you the main features of this and talk about some things that I like and I don't like, but I'm not going to get into the crazy ins and outs of this. Cool. So subscribe to the channel, like the video if you want to see more hardware stuff. I also do lots of crazy sound design things, mostly within Bitwig and Faceplant. But yeah, let's dive in. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up a brand new patch. And from the beginning, whenever you open this up, a way to initialize this is you need to go to either oscillator 1, 2, or 3. You need to tap this little thing at the bottom. This is a touchscreen, by the way. And you can either scroll through your presets here, or you can hit initialize and then just hit this. The thing with this is that there are lots of different modes, and the workflow of this is designed more so around trying to stack sounds as opposed to what I'm used to, which is taking a single source and applying a billion different effects. Thankfully, I actually have a lot of other really cool stuff to help me out with that, like the Zoya, the microcosm, the analog heat plus effects. So this is kind of like an in-game synth, if you will, on having a hybrid between a cool synthesizer that can make some great sounds and having a whole suite of effects to send this through in which to just decimate sound with. Now, I haven't gotten to that part yet, but I'm learning these things one at a time. Also factor in things like the Oxy One sequencer or the Hapax that the lovely Scorp instrument sent to me, which thank you, by the way. Yeah, man, we're just in for a world of really fun exploration. So first and foremost, let's talk about wavetable. I want to answer your burning questions before we go any further. You can make your own wavetables, but it doesn't have a harmonic editor. And so what I mean by that is, weirdly, it doesn't have something that you would see, say, if we're using the resonator, to where you can see that we've got harmonics here. This is probably one quirk. I don't want to start off with something negative because I actually have a lot of positive things to say about this. But I do think that if you had a partial editor like this, and then maybe you also had a waveform editor, or sorry, not waveform, but a wavetable editor to where it's just like partials or tools, partial maker, whatever, and then you can do that. I'm like, why doesn't that exist? That it should be a thing, but it's not that big of a deal. That being said, you can do a lot of different stuff to the waveforms themselves in which to kind of change them and make them morph, if you will. So for one, your wavetables are here, and it's kind of cool that you can just scroll through whatever it is that you want to do. You've got very quick access. You can either use the encoders here, or you can use your finger to change this, whether it be the positioning. This is whether or not the waveform travels. One thing I would like to see is I want to see the waveform move, but you can at least hear it, that it said wow. You've got 8 non-velocity sensitive pads over here on the right. You can also change the brilliance over this. And then depending on what mode you're looking at, say wave, you can add different things like noisy. You can change this from limit to wrap. You can change the phase of this. Here's your here's the specs on here. So again, you can change the positioning of this, but I'm like, this is already there. Like, why can't we just let me do the partials? Sorry, I digress. Within this modes here, you've also got different effects types, which goes from off, reduce, truncate, drive, and gain. So if you want to make your wavetable louder, you can do that, or squarify it basically. Between the stepping or interpolation, you can change this to have it kind of move like this if you want to. So the positioning will be more so less smooth if you want it to be kind of jagged. And then you've also got 4 different modes here, which is normal, legacy, harsh, and dirty. I don't actually know what these do timbrally other than dirty. I think just probably adds hopefully some low end or maybe some crunch or some high end harmonics over that. But that's not the only thing that you can do with this. You can also go into your tools and go and say talk. This says I am quantum synth. I'm going to say, without any spaces, subscribe to Alckemy, to Alckemy, to Alckemy. We go return. And if we look at this on a 3D tool, you're going to see that we've created a wavetable. One thing that I would appreciate, because this is kind of volatile with what this does with the harmonics and all that, is if you could at least add a fundamental to this, to which you can do with a sub, which that exists, but at least like a fundamental option, that would be nice. But now, if we listen to this, okay, we got the subscribe out, but we can go into the global here, or sorry, the control, and go to the pads and then change the octave like this. And then we have different wavetables that we can work with. And so even though I'm not expecting this to be perfect in what it says, this is more so just a means of timbral things. And so one thing that I'll say that works really well off of this is if you go to talk again and we do things that are low vowels. So we go like, ooh, how, warg, something like that. Then this is actually a great way to get like some monster wavetables in here without having to utilize a lot of effort. So you see there's a lot of formants within this, and that makes it pretty cool, and it's definitely like workable. You can also import your own stuff. You can save this as a preset if you want to. So we can go here. One thing that would be cool is if I could just save whatever text that was in, as opposed to having to go back and type out what I just did. So we're just going to go warg or warg. It doesn't matter. It's just for the sake of having this. And then we go return. And then now we've got another wavetable preset saved within this in itself. If you go to the tools here, there's some other things that we can do as well. So let's say I actually have, I'll show you this, a sample loaded in here, or I want to record a sample. I can go into the master, I believe. Sorry, maybe it's the global audio. There we go. And so if you go to global audio, you can go record source main or input. And within this can resample internally, which is another feature that is built in within Serum. So the workflow things within this are relatively limitless because of that. So if I go record, and we need to go to the trigger, and we're going to go to note, and I go record, and I go cancel. Now we have this. We can go to edit, we can go to normalize, and now we've got this, and we can save this as a sample. So we're going to go to recordings, which I should already have some stuff in here. Sorry, sometimes this is a bit jank with this, and we are going to label this as war, maybe. Sometimes it takes a second to catch up. War, sure. We go return, and then we go save. And so now we have a sample built within this. Let's go back to the tools here. We're going to go to analyze the audio. We're going to go Wara, whatever, and then go load. And then now this will create a different wavetable out of this. Whether or not this is predictable, I have no idea. But it is a thing, and it is pretty cool that we have something like this. I'm wondering if there's some other stuff. Oh, maybe that's what I should have done is go import from wave. So let's try that instead. So let's go load. We'll go load. There we go. That's a little bit more. Let's go back to the global here, or sorry, the control. I'm going to go to the pads and go to this. There we go. Let's go back to the oscillator. And we can start to manipulate this to change this into different forms. And instead of turning the drive on, we'll kind of relax off of that. Maybe change this to truncate or something, which I think is more of a bit crusher, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you can make your own wavetables in here, and I really wanted to spend some time on this because this is a very important feature that I think a lot of people are going to be asking and wondering about. Very quickly, I'm going to see if I can turn this off. No, I think that it's better with the light on. So yeah, bunch of white noise looking stuff here. But within that, you can also go and, manipulate this with any of the other wavetables that you have, which is pretty nice. As you can see, there's quite a large selection of that. So that's pretty much everything that you have within the wavetable. Let's go ahead and look at the waveform now. This is great for making respaces and all that other stuff because you can stack sounds on here without it affecting the unison. And so what I mean by that is over on this, we have counts. So we can set this to 2. We can set this to detune. Let's go ahead and grab the pads and set this to a higher octave. And the engine within this is like, even if this was just the only thing that you had, I think people would still probably buy this thing because the analog modeled, actually, I don't know if it's analog modeled or not, but the waveform on here presents quite a lot of options that you can work with. So we've got sine, triangle, square, pink noise, white noise, pings, and the Grieger noise, which is something that I haven't seen except in Serum 2 even. And so with this, with these counts, we can also stack these to say an octave higher. And so you can create up to 1, 2, 3, 4 different layers on here. And what we can also do is reset the phase. And I do also think that there is a thing on here that has the phase on here to set back at normal. Now within this isn't the only way to get Reeses on here, and that's probably the most important thing for me is, does it Reese? Yes, it does. If you go to master and you go to the voices here, you can also set the unison to 2 and then set individual detuning. We want to set the panning to off, and then we can change the detuning to something like this. I'm just going to make it dramatic for you being able to hear what it's doing. This can go all the way up to 8 different voices. Sorry, I only have 8 pads to work with on this, so forgive me, but it's cool because you can see that you can still play the thing, it just doesn't give you, it gives you one scale. Which I will say, since we're talking about that, on these pads, you can set them to be whatever you want. You can also set these to up to 4 note chords. So let's say you want a chord on this. You need to turn these on. And then now you've created a chord, and you can set that to whatever chord you want that to play as, which is kind of nice. With that being said, if you need to change the octave, hit Control, go to your pads. You can change the octave here, and there's that. But I just kind of wanted to cover that quickly so that way you're not having to figure out how to navigate what to do with that. So I'm going to go back here. We're going to set this back at 0. Then I'm going to go back to the control, or sorry, the master. We're going to set this back to a single voice. This offers up to 12 different voices, and if you have unison, it starts to eat those, so be mindful of that. But within this, I guess just as a general approach, the core thing with this is that it has 2 layers on here that you can either do in different ways. Like you can use this as an A-B, you can layer these together, and in between each layer, you can have up to 3 oscillators, and they can also have their own independent set of effects and LFOs and all that other stuff, or its own independent sequence, or the other things that you have in here, whether it be particle or resonator or kernels. So in theory, if we're talking about something like drums, which I haven't made any drums in this yet, but I'm really excited to, you can essentially have 3 voice engines as your fundamental for your snares. So you've got pitch envelope, white noise 1, white noise 2. Great. Layer 2, you have particle, not a particle, what is it called? Partial engine for your physical modeling in which to create a snare tail. Pretty crazy, right? We are going to talk about the other stuff here in just a second, but before I go any further, I also want to talk about the filtering options that you have, to where it was a little bit confusing for me. But there's a thing in here called routing, and this is where you can find everything. Unfortunately, you can't route filter 1 into filter 2 into this thing right here, which is digiformer. This is a third filter that has a bunch of different options that scale from anywhere from the drive to comb to bit crusher to your typical filters on here. This is the only place also that you have a notch, which is kind of strange, which is at the end. So I'm glad that it exists, but at the same time, I'm also like, what? The other thing is that there's a formant filter on here, I believe, but you can't change the cutoff of where this is. You can change the formant itself, but it's like, what? I don't know, kind of strange. You also can't run these in parallel, so you can't have something to where you have multiple instances of all this stuff going out, although you can freely route where oscillator 1, 2, and 3 goes into play. You can do something like this where it says former and filter, or you can have everything run in parallel if you want, which I guess is kind of cool, but this filter, the filter 1 and 2 are meant to be stereo filters. It's not necessarily saying that you have to dedicate it to left and right, but the dual filter system is meant to, I think, be one left, one right. If you have this set to pan though, then what ends up happening is you just have a parallel chain that's running through. This is actually beneficial for stuff like Reese's because you can have one thing be something like a bandpass. Let's say bandpass on this one, and make sure that your filter pan is set to center. And then we'll go and change the cutoff here. I don't need that key tracking, but we can change the resonance. There we go. So you can have something like this floating around, you know, your low mids or whatever. But then when we go to the DigiFilter 2, this can be something like a high pass. And so what you're able to do is create a 2-band frequency split to where this can be set up. And you see that this is independent. You can set them to linked or boost or to twin peaks or to escaping, which I haven't really seen what these do yet. Oh yeah, great. So there you go. Now you can create a notch within that. So as this goes up and this goes down, they can kind of cross over and you can still maintain a sense of low end on here, which that's actually very helpful. I learn something new every time I do this stuff. So within this, keep in mind that you also have your layer 2 that can also have an independent sound if we're talking about building neurobases. And you've got some crazy layering that you can do. It's going to take you some time, but that's the benefit of, or not the benefit, but that's kind of the appeal to hardware is like slow down, be intentional with your design, and like, you know what I'm saying? Take your time with it and really build a relationship with the intention behind what you're doing. I don't know, whatever. So with the routing, you'll see that all of this goes into the effects. We can also change this into these different things. So 2 plus 3, 1 plus 4. So parallel, 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 1 plus 2 plus 2, whatever. For the most part, in my opinion, probably just serial. I don't even care about like throwing phasers and, you know, reverb or whatever on the low end, because on the back end of things, when it comes into the compression and the OCT and all that other stuff, or when it gets into the DAW, I'm going to fix it anyhow. So don't be afraid to, you know, break all those rules. Oh, reverb on a bass? What? It's fine. Don't worry about it. Onto the effects, which we're going to go back and talk about the FM synth probably last, or the other oscillator engines last, just because I think it's going to be easier to explain, because this stuff is kind of easy to get through. You've got these different effects. So tremolo, phaser, chorus, flanger, delay, reverb, EQ, drive, compressor. There's also a master compressor on here, which perform. It's on here somewhere. Master compression. So that's a thing. Keep that in mind. And there's also a bass boost on here. This is where you change your timbre mode. But yeah, so that exists. Now within these, the one unfortunate thing, like probably the biggest letdown of this, there's 2 letdowns of this, and it's not a deal breaker, but I was just kind of like, ah, man, you can't have multiple effects within these slots. Otherwise, if you could, you can do something like this to where you've got this on an EQ, and you can use this as both a notch and a filter. So this is your extra stuff. This right here can also be used as a low pass, even though it's just a shelf. I'm not upset about that. And then this can also be a high pass filter and a shelf. And then what I love is that you actually have a frequency shift here. The strange thing about it, though, is that this doesn't go up the entire way. So if you look, this is starting to cap out, and I can't move this any lower than what this midband is. And so there's like a cap on how low this can actually, achieve. There's a lot to be desired with this EQ. For one, if I could have multiple, that would probably be best case scenario. Two, I would like this to be 8 bands. That would be the next best case scenario. Actually, 8 bands would be the best case scenario, along with having multiple instances. But even just one provides you, that many more filter types. So it makes making neurobase and stuff at least a little bit easier, which I'll show you one at the end of the video that I made with just this. It's not perfect, but it's a starting point. That being said, I appreciate that it exists. A scale mode would also be pretty cool. But yeah, it's not terrible. The other thing with this as well is that while you can mod the frequency shift, you can't mod any of this other stuff other than the dry wet, I guess. Which, to be fair, that's actually not a terrible thing. So rather than shifting everything, what you could do is create a val, a very simple val at that, but you can create a val like this and then automate the dry wet to go wow, wow, wow. That is a thing, and that's good to kind of keep note of. But there's also no other filters within this that are like, how do you say, malleable. Like you get 5-6 filters at the most, which again, you are probably like, dude, what do you need that for? And I'm like, well, when you see the kind of sound design that I do, I need lots of filters. I need lots of filters, lots of distortion. With that being said, we've also got the tremolo, the phaser, the chorus. The delay, oddly, is I think that and the chorus are the only ones that have the high cut and the low cut, which could be cool, but you can't modulate those, which I'm a little bit baffled about, but that's okay. You've also got the drive on here, which the drive has a tube. So there you go. That's all you really need. I would like more modes on here or a wave shaper, to where you just have a linear curve with the dynamics and you can pick something like that. That's probably asking way too much, but how sick would that be? I don't know how that would do with DSP and all that other stuff, but this is pretty cool. I do like it. You can set the amount on here, and I like that it shows you the curve, all that other stuff, dry wet, amounts, pickup, diode, crunch. Tube is probably the only one that you need, though. That's pretty good for the kinds of stuff that I'm looking for. So oddly, within the reverb, there's no high cut on there. I'm kind of like, what? Why not? Also on the flanger, there's no high cut. Sounds great, by the way. I think that's off. But it does sound really good, and I would definitely recommend giving that a go, especially with building Reese's and stuff. And speaking of, if we go down here within this, you can go into these actions here, or you can do these sortings on this. So if we go to import, export, delete, that's how you can get into some of your other stuff on here. Let me just scroll down. It would be cool. Oh man, I'm so silly. So if I go all the way to the end, which is me, Alckemy, then you can see that we've got some stuff here. I can go bass 2. We go load. Then I'm going to go into global control and set this to octave 1, octave 3. Cool. We can check out bass 2. Can't do the cool, like really high pitch bendy things or whatever, but yeah, it sounds cool. It's a great starting point. And then once I send that through the Zoya and the analog heat plus effects, but I already have the main components of this down pretty well. And so when it comes into all of that, especially with the filters, and we look at this, you can set them up with your LFOs to where there's a matrix. And one thing that's kind of weird that I will say with this that is kind of like I'm on the fence about is when we talk about modulation on here, like let's say we're going to mod the warp, you can go to the modulations, but then this pops up. And I'm like, well, why can't I just add a destination here? You have to go through another menu to go through the matrix, which thankfully it'll latch. Sorry, I don't know why that's shaking. It'll latch, and then you can set whatever destination you want. So let's say envelope 2, whatever. Then you can set the amount up here. So it'll do it, but that was a lot to just get a single modulation through here. There's also the complex modulation on this. So if you go mod, this is where you find the multi-stage stuff. So you can set a curve to get a multi-stage envelope. You can change the slew of this, change the sync, poly, global, envelope, change the phase, change the delay. So you can, there is technically a multi-stage envelope on this, but you can't really move the points on this. On the complex here, you can change the warping of this, the speed, you can change the blend. So you can create stuff. That's kind of cool. It's like random. Or I guess that's like a jitter thing, right? That's becoming more like noise. That's very fast and very scary. It's cool that it exists, but yeah, within that, just kind of twisting the knobs here because I actually haven't used this yet, but you can create different stuff like that, which is kind of nice. Then you have mod targets that you can set these to or set them to presets. But the modulation reminds me of Serum for the worst because it is a lot like the mod matrix in Serum is just not my favorite, but it's a thing. And if you're comfortable with working in that, then there's that. I guess you are losing the quick access to the LFO assignments and whatnot, but you can instead work the other way if you want to. So you can pull up the LFOs, to which you have 6, which is a lot, especially for a thing like this, plus the other envelopes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 envelopes. And the mod, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 complex things. Like you can get insane with this. Even though I don't usually use a lot of mods like that anymore anyways, unless if I'm doing like completely random sounds, which I definitely will get at some point. Let me know if you all want to see a video on how to do like a crazy glitch generator or something in this. It's definitely capable, beyond capable of getting something absolutely bonkers. But I typically try to assign everything to like 1 to 2 LFOs now, just because I want them to have a relationship, especially with bass design, and get into stuff like that. So we're not going to cover the sequencer. We did cover the samples, and now that we have covered that, I'm going to go into a new patch now, and I want to talk about the last 2 things. First off, let's go ahead and talk about the particle engine, which this is your sampler. It also can do granular sampler or granular synthesis. So if we go particle, we can change that to a granular. We're going to hold off on that, but the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go load a thing, I believe. So selected sample. I don't actually know how to get a sample in here. Select. Okay, so that's the audio editor. We go back to this. We go close, normal, live granular mode, which is something that you can process in real time. I haven't actually messed with that, so we won't cover that today. Particle. Okay, you can change that there. We can go add maybe. Auto map, edit, select, particle, normal sample, close. Not really sure. I guess maybe what I have to do is get, there we go. So I have to load something in here. Actions. Okay. Not really sure with that one. But if we go here and we change this for whatever reason to the particle engine, and then we go samples, I think that that's how we can get the sampler in here. Sorry, I'm train wrecking. Give me just a second to figure this out. Let's go here. Particle, samples. I guess we have to go into the samples on this. And then we go file. There should be a thing that says load. Load patch? No. Edit. A little bit cumbersome. That's okay. We'll figure it out. So typically speaking, I'm not really sure how to get this in here. But you've also got these other options that I haven't explored. So what we'll just do is pull up a sampler. And then we'll just grab a preset because I'm going to see if that will give me a clue in which to how to load this. But yeah, within the sampler, you've got some options here. Sorry for the hiccup. And this will show you all of your files. I just don't know how I was supposed to get everything in there. Maybe if you go to the control or the audio on here, say load. Yeah, so you might have to do it through this, and then you can load a sample into this, and then maybe you have to assign this to the engine itself. But yeah, once you have everything in here, you can switch this over to granular, and then you've got something that looks like this. And this is kind of a typical run-of-the-mill granular sampler. So you've got position jitter, which is like you randomize the placement. You've got travel, which is how far how this travels. So let me go to the envelope here. Let's make this nice and pretty by adding some attack. And then we can also use our finger like this. We can give ourselves some release. A little bit more. Cool. Again, this is in mono, by the way, so just because of the way that I have to have this set up, but we can change the positioning of the sample if we want to. We can change the length of the grains. So if we want to make them really long, kind of like this. And something really cool that you can do is you can have up to 6 different grains on here, I think. And within this, you can change the pitch of all these. So if you want to set this to a chord to where some of these are pitched up by an octave, kind of like so, you can do that. Maybe we can do 7ths, and now we can create a chord out of this. We just need to find where the particle number is. Grain poly. Set this to 8. And then we can also have different attack and decay on here. And this would be kind of like your shape, right? Or your grain shape rather. So we can set this to be like slow attack, slow decay, long decay, which is pretty nice. But I like that you have pretty much everything that you would want within a fully featured granular synth on here. The only thing that this doesn't have that I don't think it does is synchronized playback within this. It might, but I don't think that it does, as far as I know. Something that you could do is on the travel here, you could probably set this up to where it repeats, or you could use an LFO. There are some other ways around that, but as a means of like the sync to where it's granular, but it plays back at 1/4 or whatever. That's kind of one thing that you have to keep in mind. So we can change the grain length. We can change the actual length of this. Change the position. Change the stereo on this to center if you want. You can change this to ping pong to where it'll reverse back into itself. So I'm just going to hold the note. And then even though this is going to go quiet, you can see that this will go there. You can set it to 1 shot. You can set this to global. You can set the playhead speed to be faster or slower. And if you want to change the division on here, because you see how this is on normal, you can actually change this to fine to where you can get more granular, no pun intended, with the adjustments on here of how much you want this to go. So if we add a little bit of reverb to this, which I know everybody loves, we'll set the gain on here, set a little bit of time. Change the control to a higher octave. And then here is where you can kind of change all of your samples and select the pitch of them or change whatever it is that you want to. You can go in and edit this if you want. So there's an actual audio editor on this that you can apply. So you can change this to reverse if you want. You can change the loop mode on. You can change the sample gain, pitch tracking, all that other stuff. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily like a 128, but it kind of can be if you think about it, because you have a sample selection on here. You also have multi-sample on here, which I haven't done yet. And that's like some of the features that I have not explored from before. But even still, like if you haven't seen by now, like look how much stuff this thing does. It's so much. Now, one thing I will also say is that there is a built-in sequencer. You have an arpeggiator. You also have a sequencer on here. With the arpeggiator, you've got a couple of options on this that are cool. There's not that many different patterns that you can choose from. There's 31 actually. But if we set this in the mode, that's more so what I was getting at with the algorithm. You've only got up, and down, down and up, and vice versa, and then random. So I was a little bit bummed about that. The other thing is that you do have swing, but you don't have like humanized. And when it comes into the sequencer as well, you don't have offset steps. And I don't expect them to have something like this because, again, I make a very niche kind of music. It's where most people making stuff in this are using more of a clinical style of electronic music like techno or house, or, you know, to where there might be a little bit of swing, but it's not like super glonky and wonky beats. That being said, it's not that big of a deal because once this gets into audio anyways, say within Bitwig here, then I'm going to drag it out, change the key, do mangling to it anyways. This is just a starting point for me. And it's the same deal with the Hapax and all this other hardware that I have. And that's kind of the thing that I want to relay is like, I'm not going to try to use this as the centerpiece of like making a track with this. I'm more so concerned about trying to get something interesting that have not explored before into this and have physical things to work with while I can stack effects onto it and have lots of other different things going on at once to, again, have a means to resampling. But because this offers a physical approach to the starting point, which is the source, which I think is where it stands out the most, that's where, in my opinion, it's going to shine the brightest. So the last thing that we are going to talk about, and I apologize that it's a little bit here and there, whatever. I'm going to guess that you can skip through the video and figure out what I'm talking about based off of how the screen looks. To which, unfortunately, there is no USB through audio. This is a DIN connector power cable, by the way, which is kind of weird. I would prefer just the regular 9-volt circular thing, but whatever. Is the kernels, because this thing is crazy. There's one thing that I don't like about this. It's not a big deal, but it kind of stinks. And I'll just go ahead and go through that now. Now, when you're first greeted with this, you have this, and this is more of like a visual layout of setups. So if you go to a template here, FM, you'll see that you can apply this different stuff here with this faceplate to where you can adjust this more so as macros as opposed to getting down and dirty in the FM synth. However, if we go to, let me see, can I go to initialize? There we go. If we go here, this is what you're going to be greeted with, and it's going to be very confusing because you're like, what am I looking at? You need to go to the edit tab, and this is where we have our FM synth. Within this, we've got up to 6 kernels, not to be confused with Sanders, that have a bunch of different kernel types. So we have sine, we have wavetable, and this is the thing that I was mentioning that I'm disappointed about. You only have the factory wavetables to go through, but there's a lot. And to be honest with you, it's probably more than you'll ever need. Still, me just being me, I would love to be able to import my wavetables into a kernel and apply FM to those and do all the other stuff, whatever. But between the effects, only being able to use one instance, not being able to put the filters in serial, and then not being able to use custom wavetables on there. And then I guess the other, nitpicky things are not having a true harmonic editor, both for the additive engine and the wavetable engine. These are all things that you can still get by. Like, it doesn't keep you from making cool sounds. And it's a limitation, but it's not a limitation that's going to severely impact your experience with this. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. That being said, between all of these different things, what you want to do is set each one to, let's say, out, kind of like so. And so now if we go to the exit, sorry, we need to go to edit, and then we need to go to patch. You'll see that we've got everything kind of stacked like this. And the reason why these are highlighted is because within these kernels here, you have to go into the algorithm, or sorry, kernel 2, then you have to go to mod. And now you can have your routing. So you can have up to 3 different routings, but this is fine because it basically provides 3 feedback systems, to where you can have 2 external sources, 3 external sources. Let me start over. 3 mod sources and then a self-feedback. But you can't have mod source 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 go into 6. You know what I mean? So if you want to create a chain of FM to FM to FM to FM to FM, you can do that. But as a means of having, let's say kernel 6 being fed into, kernel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feeding into 6 all at once, and then feedbacking and all that other stuff, you're not going to be able to accomplish that. But this is more than enough to mess with. So let's say I go kernel 1, right? It's not feeding back into anything. Kernel 2, we're going to feed back into kernel 1. Kernel 3, we're going to feed back into kernel 2. 4 is going to go from 3. 5 is going to go from 4. And then 6 is going to go from 5. So now we have a single line of a chain of FM to FM to FM to FM to FM. Now, one thing with this, which I don't think is actually that big of a deal, but something to be aware of, is that you can only have a single output of a kernel engine times 3, right? Because you have up to 3 different oscillators, times 2, because you have 2 different layers that you can utilize if that's what you want to do. That's a lot. That is a lot. So while I am a little bit disappointed that you can't have the, separate kernels going into their own outputs or whatever, the thing is like, I'm going to tell you something philosophically about stacking waveforms and engines and stuff. You can definitely get some cool stuff, but because you're using multiple sources, one of the major things that you're going to run into is volume stacking, right? Amplitude. The other thing that you have to deal with is phase. Because if you have a bunch of different sounds playing all at once, then you're going to have to deal with the phase cancellation and all that. Personally, for me, I wouldn't have been upset if you have a single oscillator that can do all this crazy stuff and then they just went ham with effects. And so if anybody's out there that, is building hardware, say like the Iridium Core effect version or something, give me a single oscillator with as much wave shaping capability as possible, wavetable, FM, all that other stuff, but just give me a buttload of effects that I can just stack and modulate to my heart's content. And the reason why I say that is because whenever you have stuff with effects and you're running them even from, parallel or serial and all that other stuff, if you think about it, it's kind of the same thing, but I don't know. I just prefer, I've always been this proponent of single source, lots of effects, and adjust the effects. But this is like the opposites, where it's like lots of oscillators, lots of sound sources, very limited effects. And that's actually a good thing because I don't usually work this way. And now within this, I'm hoping that this will influence the stuff that I make on Phase Plant or in the grid or with whatever synth that I'm using, if that makes sense. So with that being said, I think that's pretty much a general overview about how all this stuff works. I haven't really talked about, or haven't remembered rather, how to load samples in there, but you can. And then I think with the other stuff, it's like, yeah, you got 3 oscillators per layer. Each layer takes up a voice. And if you're not playing each layer together, then you're only still taking up one voice. So it's like a toggle. If you go on the master, you can change that to playing at once, to where that starts to take up 2 voices. And then this has up to 12 voices versus the desktop version, which the desktop version has analog filters built in. It also has 16 voices as opposed to said 12. Cool. Sound good? So why the heck did I buy this? Well, because it's freaking awesome. 2, because when I get my setup going, which I do not have enough desk space for, of all of this other stuff that I have up here, which you can't see it. My Digitone 2 is in the Pokemon Center because it's being sent back for repair. It's not technically broken, but the power cable is very loose. But Analog Heat, Digitact, Oxy One, Hapax, which is off the table, so that way I can make this video. Bitwig Connect, Microcosm, Empress, Zoya, Bitwig, Phase Plant. I should be good for a long time. So yeah, if you stuck with me through this video, even though I don't think that you have the Iridium core, if you do, then dope. Let me know some cool tricks if you've got any that you figured out as I'm learning this. But I appreciate you just hanging out with me, because really what this is about is it's a music channel. I don't have any affiliate links for this. I paid for this on my own. I will say that Waldorf did offer me a discount, but I found it cheaper off of Reverb, so I went with that option because I'm not full of money. But yeah, it's just something that I love music, and I love gear, and I love sounds, and I love making stuff that we haven't heard before and staying inspired and just being like, yo, check this thing out. It's cool to enjoy. And so, like I said before, if you stuck with me through this video, I really appreciate that, you know, you were willing to listen to me babble about, you know, some nerdy thing that probably 2% of my demographic is going to use. With that being said, do you have any interest in the Iridium core? Is there another synth that you're just like absolutely over the moon about that maybe I can reach out to the company that makes it and see if I can demo it and send it back, or as a loan or something? Let me know. I enjoy this stuff, and it's fun to just geek out with sounds. But thank you so much. Final things, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video. Leave me a comment, please. There's a new feature called like cheer or something like that that you can use to push videos. And I'm not saying that you should do that with this video, but if you have another video like the comprehensive guide to neurobase that I have, push that for me. That would be super awesome. And if you want to directly support the channel, memberships, alchemy.com has my music. It also has my sounds and my presets, or you can book a lesson. So thanks everybody. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you all in the next one.